So I just finished reading Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, and I give that book a solid 10 out of 10, and it probably ranks in the top 5 business books, entrepreneurship books, or even spirituality books that I've ever read. Think and Grow Rich was originally written in 1925, and the reason that Napoleon Hill wrote the book was on the advice from Andrew Carnegie that he should go around and document what it was that made so many people successful. So Napoleon Hill made contact with hundreds of millionaires and followed them around throughout their day-to-day lives, had conversations with them, studied them to understand what it was that they were doing or what it was in their thought process that made them able to achieve things that so many others could not achieve. So I guess I'd have to say the book is psychological in nature. It's psychology focused with a little bit of personal philosophy from Napoleon Hill. But studying all these millionaires, the entire intent was to understand human motivations. And besides wanting wealth, he outlines a step process in order to achieve anything that you want out of life, not necessarily just limited to having wealth. So Napoleon Hill's 6 steps were outlined as 1. Fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. Step 2 is, what are you going to give back to get this money? Step 3, establish the date by which you will acquire the money. Step 4, create a definite plan and execute. Step 5, write out a statement stating how much you desire, the time limit, and what you intend to give to get the money. And step 6 is read the statement during the day, when you wake up, and before you go to bed. And this sounds easy enough, right? We're laying it out in 6 easy steps. You just write it on a piece of paper, it happens. But the hardest part is committing to the plan and actually executing on it. So why don't we execute? What are the things that hold us back from taking that next step? And Napoleon Hill gives some great context onto the exact reasons why we don't execute on our plans, on our dreams. Call it the leftovers of our caveman instincts, but our brains are wired to listen and prioritize emotion over our own thoughts and logical thinking. Of those many emotions that we listen to, Napoleon Hill discusses how fear is something that it's not just in a circumstance. It's not in a singular moment that we have fear of something. If we are feeling fear in one moment, it's invasive through the rest of our lives. So, for example, if you have a fear of failure, that fear of failure isn't just going to be in this one moment of, I decided to turn the job down because I thought I was going to fail. That feeling, that fear actually follows you through your day-to-day decision making. So if you are actually deep down afraid of failure, if you're afraid of the opinions of other people, then those fears, those emotions are fueling your decision making. He discusses that there's these negative emotions such as fear that really stand in our own way. Like when we say that our greatest enemy is ourselves, this is a pure example of that. So surprisingly, he lists out a ton of different fears that a person can be experiencing. What I appreciated about it was that he listed these fears. He also listed off the symptoms. So you could have this fear underlying, but here are the symptoms and the behaviors that are displayed because of this underlying fear and this thought that exists within you. You're going through this list of fears, the entire process of reading through it is a logical battle with yourself. If you have fear of failure, you cure it through logic, you cure it through information and knowing something about the fear. So if your fear is failure, then the solution is to recognize that everybody fails, that failure is a part of life, that if you never try, then you'll never fail, and if you never fail, you're never going to learn, and failure is how you grow from it. That setback, you're going to learn from it. So once positive thought is aligned with positive emotion, then you're trending in a positive direction towards your goal. And as Carnegie phrases it, it creates this magnetic force which pulls things towards you as you raise your own vibration. Napoleon Hill spends a large section of the book discussing limited beliefs and training your mind. So ultimately, if you believe you can't, then you can't. And Napoleon Hill shared a personal story in the book where his son was born with an inability to hear. And Napoleon Hill, since his son was born, refused to accept that as truth. So he noticed that when he would rest his baby's head on the floor, like with wooden floors, similar to Beethoven, the baby was able to, like recognize the vibrations. Or when the father was kissing the side of the baby's head, your lips, the words you're whispering, are vibrating against the cranium skull and still somehow being communicated that like there's words there. So constantly with this stimulation for his child that, he can hear, he'll make his own way of finding his ability to hear. It was this pure determination between a father and his son, and then the son ended up having the same determination through his life that he refused to be deaf, essentially. Fortunately, through time and with technology, hearing aids came out. And his son was one of the first people to use these new hearing implants, and he was able to finally hear. And it wasn't just that he had his eardrums were too small or anything. It was the deafness was from both eardrums never fully developed. So the fact that his son continued to believe that he would hear someday, and technology arrived and it gave him exactly that, his son ended up becoming one of the best salesmen and advocates for this hearing product. So belief is where it first started. He refused, even the son refused. It started with a belief. And beliefs are ultimately set by what your parents taught you, by what people in your environment have taught you. And that's just how we perceive reality, and we believe these things to be the truth. So there was this great experiment that was done, and this wasn't listed in the book, but this is a separate tangent of an experiment that was conducted, and it was called the fleas in a jar experiment. And if you've never heard of it, what happens was they put a bunch of fleas inside of a glass jar. When they first put them in the jar without the lid on, all the fleas were just jumping out. They put them back in, jump out. So they screwed the lid onto the top of the jar. And as the fleas would continue to jump, they would hit the top of the head, and it would be like pink, 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 pink against the top of this metal jar. And after so many generations of, more fleas are starting to be produced, and the parents are only able to jump this high, after so many generations of these fleas, they removed the top of the jar, and they realized that the fleas were only able to jump to where the top of the jar was. These fleas, just, a few generations before, or even just a generation before, was able to hop out of the jar. But that limitation that you set on one generation became almost genetically encoded. When they talk about there are some instinctual fears or some instincts that are just genetic to us, they're inheritable. I guess this is a prime example of it, where you have a limited belief, you inherit it from your parents in your own way, and you only believe that you can go so high. You only jump as high as you are told that you can jump. We can only jump as high as we are taught to jump. As whatever people tell us, hey, you can achieve this, we can achieve that. But if in our own beliefs we believe that we can't go higher than what other people said that we can do, then therefore we have set our own limit and our own ceilings for ourselves. There's a great quote that's been pretty popular recently, and the quote goes, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." And Napoleon Hill states that close friends and relatives, while not meaning to do so, often handicap one through opinions and sometimes through ridicule, which is meant to be humorous. Napoleon Hill provides an example of a man named Marconi. And Marconi, his friends ended up getting him sent to a psychopathic hospital because Marconi had announced that he had discovered a principle through which he could send messages through the air without the aid of wires or direct physical means of communication. And today we call it the radio. But back then he was considered to be so crazy for having this out-of-box idea that his own friends sent him into a hospital for it, a mental hospital. It really makes you think that you're gonna have influences in your life, whether they're friends, family, they can believe you up to a certain extent a lot of times, but there will come a day that they're gonna start to doubt that you can hit these new highs, and you just cannot be convinced by them. Don't let their opinions sway you, or else you just need a different group around you that's telling you that you can do this. And regarding a circle of influences, Napoleon Hill was actually the first person to coin the phrase mastermind group. So he studied a lot of figures through reading autobiographies or biographies, and he turned his idols such as Lincoln, Emerson, Henry Ford, he would envision that he was sitting in a room with all of these people that he idolized and looked up to, and almost like in a meditative state, he would kind of simulate having conversations with these people in the room. And by doing so, he was able to extract a lot of like the wisdom and experience that these people had, because he was concentrating on sharing his own conflicts and how would these other people who have had greater successes than him, how would they have done it? And so in having those conversations with, I guess, himself, but also like referencing the education he's had on people that were successful, he was able to apply a lot of those indirect thoughts, those line of thoughts, those simulations into his own life to continue his success. So my 3 greatest takeaways from reading Think and Grow Rich was: 1, we have the ability to do or be anything as long as we believe that it's possible. Number 2 is that we have to be aware of fears and excuses as we give them to ourselves. Fears are something that we don't always put a label to. It could just be an initial apprehension to doing something we don't want to do, something that seems a little scary or overwhelming, and that fear can ultimately be something that gets in your way of actually getting the things that you want. So the question is, do you want this thing bad enough that you're willing to overcome your fears to achieve it? The third main takeaway is that dreams are not born of indifference, laziness, or lack of ambition. That was probably one of my favorite quotes from the entire book, and it is so true. If, I feel like growing up we were all asked, like, what do you want to be someday? What are your dreams? And it's so easy to say, I want to be an actor. For me, I wanted to cut hair. Actually having those dreams and taking steps towards them, they don't just happen by themselves. You have to take the steps intentionally and exert that intent every single day to make strides towards it. So when Napoleon Hill was listing out his 6 steps, the main thing, the most important part, is that it's written down and that you look at it every single day and every single night, because you're holding yourself accountable to it. You're reminding yourself that this is what you're after. And it's okay to have ambition. It's okay to want things, but don't want things without having the willingness to work for them and to earn them. Greatness is built, it's not born. So I think that just this book, especially if you're a starting entrepreneur, if you're somebody that's in business, or if you're just anybody that has an ounce of ambition, I think that this was a great book for people that, want to start practicing like the law of attraction or law of manifestation. This book, I think, was probably like the starting point for that entire line of thinking that, we call it law of attraction and manifestation today, but I think this, from 1925, this was really the OG discussion about making the impossible become possible. So I love this book. I'm including a link to buy the book from Amazon. This is my affiliate link, and I may or may not receive a commission from any purchases, but it does all go to helping out the channel. So thank you for watching. I hope that you do end up reading the book. There's also free copies online because the book has been out and circulated for a pretty long time, so you don't necessarily need to buy it from me, but please do read it. I think that just more people feeling self-empowered, that we are able to change things, we can change ourselves, we can make the world a better place. I have not given up on that belief, and I hope that more and more people will come into that state of mind that we can do this. And just that belief that we can do something, we're probably going to do it.